Neema Mutemi is a communications and security expert, and she joins us now in the studio. We want to have a conversation about social media, particularly Facebook, and policing election-related hate speech on these platforms. Neema, good morning.
Good morning, Latif.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation. Welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you for having me back.
You know, being here just after a general has left, you understand?
Where pressure? Alafu before that a judge.
Before that, a judge.
You chose the good day.
Why? Hey.
But just so that we can equalize the situation, before that it was just us. And now again
No
it's just
pressure.
us and then you.
Yes, and then now you, right?
What are you trying to say about me, Latif?
Yeah? That we are equal.
I'm not up to task.
That wewe
Oh, no.
si
On the-
general.
on the-
Tutafika hiyo class ya
Wewe si general.
We're actually saying the
General.
complete
Wewe
opposite.
ni major general.
Where you know I used to be Secretary General of Kenyatta University Students Association. So I think niko kwa hiyo league.
Uko kwa League ya Generals, eh?
I've used general in my name.
Yeah, that's true. that's a good one. That's a good one. Neema, how you doing? What do you do besides, being a former Secretary General?
Of course.
Yes.
I do communication. I think that's how most people know me. But I don't talk about this much, but I also have a background in security, terrorism and insurgencies, basically political violence. And I do consult, especially in the area of preventing and countering radicalization and violent extremism. So I see myself as a communicator who tries to help the security sector to be more effective. Because some of the tactics and strategies that we use in corporate communication, in media relations, we can actually employ them, especially to a country like ours, evolving democracy, where we still want to promote our civil liberties, but in a safe environment where we still have all these new and emerging threats. The threat of violence is very real to every Kenyan. It's something that we think about at the back of our minds, and unfortunately during times like this, we are forced to remember how close it is and how things can change in a very short minute.
We are in the final days of the campaigns for this election. Final day is Saturday. Big rallies planned everywhere, but right now we are seeing a lot of communication coming from the various political campaigns, the various political camps for all seats. Of course, it gets to that point where now you are trying to rally your supporters by tugging at their emotion, making them feel insecure, or making them feel secure, or making them feel that if they don't come out to vote on that day, then they have lost big time, That comes also with deliberate misinformation and disinformation that is taking place, especially on social media platforms. Are you noticing that?
Definitely. And it's sad because generally we've done very well. Like for the first time in my adult life, and since I started participating in the political process, for the first time we actually saw a prolonged period of campaigning and electioneering that was driving issues, that was, very enriching conversations. And Kenyans were able to actually engage, not only with the conversation of why is ugali not affordable, but, from ugali is not affordable to why is ugali not affordable and what can we do about it? Can we sell snakes? Even if some of them went to some extremes that people didn't take too seriously, that was a very good trajectory of our country. But now towards the end, we are seeing that shift to, personality attacks and ethnic attacks. And that is definitely very dangerous. The government said, through NCIC that whilst we've seen the incidences of hate speech reduce in the public arena, the rallies that we are used to, they have actually migrated to social media. So we can't quite say that we are less less guilty of hate speech. It's just that the form in which we are practicing it has migrated, and we probably do not have sufficient tools to know the full extent to which that is. And that's where we have a problem.
So what are we seeing? If we're saying that the form of it has moved to social media, what are we seeing? Yes, because indeed, the chair of the NCIC was here as well, and he did mention that this is where the headache is now, that because it's somewhere where people are a lot, these channels, these platforms are then being used. But then what are we seeing more of that we didn't see
before? That's a good question. And maybe let's ask what you're not seeing. I think that's where the issue is. So I work with some organizations, Foxglove Legal and Global Witness and Kenya Human Rights Commission, that, presented a report to NCIC last Friday, which sort of started this whole debate of, should Facebook be suspended or not suspended? What are we not seeing? I think you're my friend on Facebook. So when I post stuff, you probably will see them. Okay. But not everybody sees your timeline the way you see it. So someone makes decisions, or algorithms, actually, robots make decisions as to what you will see. And it's different for someone who is an active user of Facebook as well as other platforms. But there's some people in this country, 10 to 12 million people use Facebook as their primary social media site, right? So that scale alone tells you that even a drop of suspicion that something bad is going on in that platform could really, really have a massive impact. Secondly, who makes those decisions, and what informs the algorithms that say that Ndu will see this advert, and not this. So the problem is, and I want to sort of debunk the myth that everyone is talking. Of course, Facebook can't police everybody. We're not even going there. We're going to advertisements. When you pay money to actually promote hate, to call, one community names, and, to literally spread misinformation and very inciting words on that platform, that also does not accept promoting ads for peace, like videos calling for peace, Kenyans, this is election time. They will not accept those adverts, but they will accept adverts that are basically pre-genocide messages and, calling for a genocide situation. That is the problem, because...
Is what you're saying really true?
100%. And it was in the statement we gave. The NCIC themselves said that they have had numerous attempts to promote peace messages, some of them actually featuring journalists. I think it was a big campaign by NCIC, and that video will not be promoted on Facebook. So we are not talking about Ndu and your 200 friends who are posting things. If that was the extent of the limit, it's not as threatening. But now we are weaponizing more than your 200 followers. You potentially could say, I want people in Rift Valley to see this message that is saying this about Kikuyus, or I want people in Luo Nyanza to see this ads that are saying this about this other community. And that's dangerous. That's where it changes completely.
And this is actually happening from what you're saying.
100%. We've got documents I can give you. And it is not just happening in Kenya. We've seen this in India, where there's also targeted ethnic violence after the elections because of inaction by Facebook, even after it had been flagged. We've seen from the Facebook files that Frances Hogan released last year that it is the same situation that happened in Myanmar, the same situation that actually happened, and you can actually link Facebook to the ongoing civil war in Ethiopia, and it also happened in the United States, where the January 6th attack on the Capitol was planned.
What you're saying is actually fairly serious, because essentially you are saying, if I understand you to be saying this correctly, if I understand you correctly, that Facebook allows on its platforms individuals and groupings who put across messages that can be considered to be incendiary. But on the other hand, when people want to deliberately put peace messages, individuals or organizations like NCIC, then Facebook does not allow them to do so.
That's 100% what I'm saying.
That is exactly what you're saying.
Yes. And we've got
under what
evidence.
circumstances does this happen?
So
I'm sure now you've studied and looked. All right.
Yeah.
Does Facebook have a policy that says we shall not promote political messaging? Does Facebook have a policy that says we shall not promote violence? Does Facebook have a policy that says we shall not promote hate speech? So if that policy exists, can we start by saying that policy does exist? Then we say then it's the policing of this policy that has some loopholes. Is that what we're saying?
So there's two levels. Yes, policy. Facebook does have multiple policies, and they even have a toolkit just dedicated to Kenya. And when you look at that toolkit on how they will, prevent election and misinformation, election-related violence, hate speech, and misinformation. It looks good on paper, right? But then there's a problematic page. It's page 13 of that toolkit will give you a very interesting story. Where they tell you that we have third-party companies that we work with that help to verify. People understand hatupangwingwi means what and why it can be hate speech and why it has been banned. So they do hire third-party companies that they submit some of this content to, once. And remember, they already had algorithms. So if you use direct, words like kill or, so those we assume will be blocked by robots. They shouldn't pass. So the messages that pass to the next level are now processed either by their content moderators in Samia Park or by, this company, third-party companies that they've engaged. But they say regarding political messaging, which is now very controversial, that they will not submit political messaging to third-party auditors, quote unquote, because they want Kenyans to be able to know what kind of leaders that they have in play, and that they do not want to interfere or sense a political dialogue. Sounds good if you're attending a political science class, right? But now when you come to what actually happens in practice, then if you're using that same rule, why would you then have your ads passing, hateful messages and not passing the peace messages? They're both political messages. Why would you then have the policy working against peace but promoting hate? So that is one problem. The second problem we have with their policies, a lot of these ads that were actually submitted, and Latif, this wasn't like a theoretical, desk review. It literally took some of the hateful messages that were used during the 2007 before post-election violence. Some of those messages that we know will make anyone from the affected community sort of feel provoked, and those were the messages that were promoted and put as adverts to check whether the Facebook policy would flag them down and ban those ads. All those 20 ads were approved, 10 in English, 10 in Swahili. So tell me, in fact, we are asking Facebook, can you tell us exactly what you mean? Because you've got a very good, PR department or, various people who have even given various press statements that were echoed by CS Joe Musheru, that we've taken down 37,000 pieces of hate and 42,000 pieces of incitement in the past 6 months. What does that actually mean? Can you give us an analysis of what percentage was this that you caught? Because we clearly can see that your CV isn't working really well. What does this represent? And when you take them down, it's after how long before they were posted? How many people had seen them? What's the impact? Don't
what
just
is the
tell
impact?
us. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, Neema, because even as we're looking at some of these things now and saying that, look, a body as big as this, I mean, we know, just like you said, millions of people who are on this platform on a daily. What is the impact of some of these messages? And that's the question here, because that's where the danger would then lie.
It's horrible. It's horrific. Let's start from where we are right now, and then I'll give you other examples in the real world. Well, in the bigger world, not real world, but in the real world still. So number one, let's look at what terror is, okay? You're not terrified when someone actually, you're not only terrified when someone actually breaks into your home and beats you on account of, we lost or whatever, you come from this community. That is, of course, it's terrifying, but that's not the only time you're terrified. You are terrified if there's a looming threat of violence that is targeting you because of your ethnicity, because of, your identity, okay? So the perpetual exposure to threatening messages on social media makes people live in a perpetual state of terror. And that is bad enough, because that will make sure that we will never have any real progress towards a cohesion as a country. Because I'll always, yes, I did not get violently attacked, but I have to go back to work and work with Ndu, and her community thinks this of us. I just saw someone calling, one community wathogs, and, like yesterday. So if I'm from that community, and this person, just by the surname in Kenya, we can more or less guess where the other person is coming from. How am I supposed to relate to that community? Okay, so Facebook can get away partly by saying that they're still building their capacity, but we're asking them very serious questions. Violence is not a joke in Kenya. Post-election violence is not theory. We know how it looks like, and we can feel it, and we've been given all indications that it might happen. If Facebook is further militarizing people who spread hate on their platforms, where 12 million Kenyans have access to these messages every single day, there's a problem.
Can you say, though, that they are actively doing this if they've offered a platform to people to operate freely and independently? Can you then say that they are directly involved in spreading these messages by virtue of the fact that they've given the platform to people to use for free?
Just like the media do. But can you come here because you've given the platform for people to speak for freely? There's some things I'll say here and I'll immediately be switched off. Tomorrow you'll be facing media cancel. That's where the problem is. To him who much is given, much is expected. And in my life as a communicator, when I'm working with corporates, we have to make sure that they're respecting the environment, they're respecting the social the society in terms of their human impact, and they're respecting the law. Unfortunately, on this one, Facebook is failing on two principles of ESG. They're failing on the human impact, the social impact, and they're failing on governance. Which there's no one country that can fully police what Facebook does comprehensively. Yes, they're an American company, but the American law will protect Americans, and that's why some people think we love litigating and human rights noise, and I'm so sorry for that. But who is going to protect Kenyans from a company that's bigger than a government? Just their revenue from 2021, which was a year that most companies did not make profit. Their revenue from 2021 alone was bigger than our GDP.
But let me ask this question: what then does Facebook aim to gain by allowing the situation that you've described? I mean,
profit.
What sort of profit?
Oh, advertising revenue. They make a lot of money by the viral.
Right.
The viral.
Yes. The viral nature of some of the communication that is on the platform. But then, if that is the aim, then why admit some and
not all?
Yes,
no one is going to promote when you pay for your content to, when you pay Facebook to advertise, they're going to place your adverts where it's likely to reach the viewers that you're paying for. Okay, so because peace is not popular, it does not have a high profit tag to it. So they're going, and now Facebook is actually competing with TikTok. So they're intentionally promoting videos, So if you post something on stories, you'll see. You'll even if you do this in your private Facebook. And I'm not a hater of Facebook. I'm a very dedicated user of Facebook. So I'm a customer, and when I'm speaking, I'm also speaking on my own account because I want to be safe on this platform.
Right.
They don't have to promote videos that have already been flagged as dangerous, that have violence. But why do they make it, when you view a video when you see a video on your timeline that has 1.1 million views, what does that tell you?
It's been around the block.
You're going to click it. Okay, so sometimes they can actually flag, and these Facebook files that were released were actually, some of them were analysis by their own staff who are uncomfortable with this situation. Going back to Ndu's question of what's the impact, we've seen that now you can literally draw a straight line between Instagram and increasing rates of suicide by teenagers and even children. The impact is big. There's no one country that has strong enough regulations or laws to police social media. It has grown so fast. It started as one thing and became, media. And now, with the announcement by Facebook, even your timeline is going to change. It's not going to be stories from your friends. They will be choosing, it will literally be a news network where you just see headlines, which we don't also know how they're targeting, because remember, this is the same company that worked with Cambridge Analytica to collect our innermost information, when you have had your baby and whose baby shower you attended. All that information is being used and targeted. You go to Instagram, which is owned by the same Meta, and if you're balding, I see we don't have that problem here. If you have a receding hairline, within a day or two you'll start having adverts of hair loss
Potions and
issues.
lotions that will make
this
hair
is not
grow.
this is not a benign.
It's the nature of the business, and you sign up and you agree to these terms and conditions, and they tell you, please go and read the terms and conditions. It is the business. We'll talk about this a bit more after we take this break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We have Neema Mutemi with us in the studio, communications and security expert. We're talking about moderation of content, particularly election-related hate speech on social media platforms such as Facebook. So we've been talking about we have been complaining, we have been doing this and the other. Neema, who's we?
We as Kenyans, actually, we have an ongoing petition that was tweeted by Kenya Human Rights Commission. Yesterday, we already have more than 1,000 signatures. So Kenyans are interested in this issue, but we also have organizations that have been working.
How many signatures do you need?
We needed 1,500, 1,600, I think, for a start, so that we have the clout, because sometimes this can be looked at as an agenda of some human rights organizations. So we wanted to actually see if Kenyans care about this, and they've signed the petition in less than a day. They've already committed.
Do we know that they are all Kenyans, the people who have signed?
We'll get the data, but I know we have a lot of Kenyans who've signed.
So is there any specific group or organization that has come together and done this particular study and said, we are looking at content on Facebook, and we have picked out X number of pieces of posts that are related to Kenya's election, and out of that, X number have been promoted. Out of the promoted ones, X are promoting violence and 0 are promoting peace. Do you have that kind of information?
Yes, we have that.
All right,
report.
give us the numbers.
So we have that report by Global Witness and Foxglove Legal, who had done this study before in Myanmar and in Ethiopia, and they were, because every time
my question is specific to
they
Kenya.
do
We are talking about election-related hate speech. In Kenya.
Yes.
Do you have the figures for Kenya?
Yes, we do.
Okay, give us those figures.
I can't give you the specific messages, sadly.
Not specific
although
messages.
I have them, but
The numbers.
100% of 10 Swahili hateful messages that were submitted to Facebook, all of them were approved. even though Facebook has content moderators in that are Swahili speaking, so they should be able to catch that. It shouldn't because it's
My
they don't have the
question, Emma,
capacity.
I'm sorry, I've got to be a bit rash on this. My question is specific. Have you gone onto Facebook, looked and surveyed, and found posts posted by other people that contain hate speech in Kenya, relating to Kenya and inciting violence in Kenya? Have you found such? How many have you found?
NCAC has done that,
Okay,
honestly.
how many
And
are
there's
there?
a report. Let me just pull it up. There's a report I got yesterday, the latest, and it was covered by even the Standard ran the story that showed out of all social media platforms, TikTok is actually leading in hate speech, followed by Facebook, followed by I don't know whether it was Twitter, then WhatsApp, and then Telegram, which was last, and Instagram also insignificant. So
If
we
I
do
remember
have
the
that
story that covered the
statistics.
NCIC,
Yeah.
it also did not talk about the specific. It did not say we commissioned a study on this time. Does it? Is there a
It's
study
not
that
a
has been
study.
commissioned?
It's not a study. This is an evolving, this is real time. So what happens, NCSC has a whole media monitoring unit that they literally watch screens and watch and follow, all the social media platforms. Now, there's information NCIC, DCI, and everyone who's watching will never be able to see, which is what we need to get from Facebook, from the collaboration. So for instance, if I target an ad that only people in Kisumu are going to see, I can monitor all I want from Nairobi. I'm not going to see those ads. The people in Kisumu would. And it would take such an immense amount of investment for the regulating authorities to literally put a unit everywhere. Whereas this is a company that can
what I'm
actually
saying is, by the
present
time
the
we
information.
get to a point where we say publicly that this particular platform is encouraging and allowing the promotion of hate speech, then we need to have the information. And
We
say,
have more than enough, Latif.
That's
We've
what
got,
I'm asking. I'm just asking for those basic figures. Don't give me the details of the information. Just tell me.
No, we've got
we have
more than
found
enough.
10,000 posts on Facebook. Out of those 10,000 posts, 6,000 are promoting hate speech.
Okay, so how does this relate to what the NCIC said? Because he was here on Monday, which is when actually this story made it into the Standard on Monday, right? So there was this report by the Commission, which is a weekly thing that they've been doing recently. And so if they give this example and saying 48 cases of hate speech picked from July 15th to July 21, TikTok had the highest numbers, right? And those were 20. Facebook followed with 12 cases of hate speech. Twitter and WhatsApp had 11 and 3 cases respectively. And so what they're saying is that in this week, this is the numbers that they have seen. Is that in relation to what you're saying?
That's not the numbers they have seen. Those are the numbers they've assessed. You understand? So it doesn't say that Kenyans only had 48 hateful messages on all social media. But those are specific incidences. Remember, there's a lot of legalese, there's a lot of security, national security interests, actually, officials that are involved in this. So some of the analysis, the reports, we are not going to get as members of the public, as the media. You could interrogate them further to give you the specifics in terms of skill. But a good place to start, Latif, to answer your question, would be Facebook. They've told us they have flagged 37,000 posts that went through. A good question to ask as a follow-up is out of how many, because not, again, everything that is flagged gets taken down. So what is the percentage of what is taken down and what is the threshold? Because what we are questioning is the threshold. It seems to be very, very high to actually cause them to take down a post and even to close an account that is perpetually set up for just spreading of hate. As a bare minimum, we are asking them to increase the investment in places like Kenya, in the area of content moderation, because they obviously have a huge capacity problem. If you're having this these kinds of cases and this dangerous situation so close to the election, really, we should have invested more than enough, Swahili speakers, even the priority languages. The NCIC has also released a hotspots list. So bare minimum, you should have people who speak Luo, you should have people who are fluent in Kalenjin, because we've even seen with the doctoring of the videos, people misinterpreting and, putting fake subtitles. They should have had, an adequate investment in safeguarding our elections. So that's what we are talking about, because it seems that the investment in content moderation outside of the US is very minimum, and it really lives are really beginning to be at stake because of their poor investments here.
Can I just perhaps point to a different perspective altogether? If indeed it is true what you say, and Facebook is allowing all this communication, this toxic communication through their network, is that not also an opportunity for the security and the intelligence agencies in our country to pinpoint and to determine who it is who is saying what and where it is that it's coming from?
Yes, it is, and they do know this. But some of the accounts, like NCIC reported, some accounts are, yes, Kenya name looks like a Kenyan on the thumbnail, but they're based in Germany or the US. So it is fine. By the time you're arresting them, the harm has already been done.
Actually,
but
yes, go ahead.
Sorry, but several times, and the NCIC has also had, this problem with Facebook. When they have flagged those individual posts, nothing happens, and this is not just
where nothing
specific
here means
to. They don't switch off their account. They do not,
You see, I wasn't even going technical on this subject. I was saying that because of what you are referring to as a proliferation, does that then not give us a very accurate picture of how it is certain individuals think in this country and what it is that they are putting out? So we actually know. And isn't it better to actually know what is happening than if this whole thing was subterranean and you had no clue it is happening, and then it shocks you by somebody suddenly exploding? This is like a warning, so you know. The question I would ask is, beyond shouting about how it should be shut down and what should happen, what is it that the agencies that deal with this matter, how is it that they're treating this information to ensure that they themselves are also prepared to ensure that they can counter it?
I think that's a good question. I'm not going to answer it in its totality because I also agree with the question 100%. But a good something we should debunk is nobody wants Facebook to be shut down. I, for one, will have to learn how to use Instagram properly and to keep up with Twitter and its hashtags. Yes. No, like seriously, nobody is calling for Facebook to be shut. But that doesn't mean we have two choices between a completely unregulated Facebook and freedom of speech. I think we can.
It's not completely unregulated.
No. Honestly, Latif, and I really want you to engage me on this. We are not regulating Facebook, first and foremost.
It is not completely
even though we have been making noise about
there's regulation
Facebook.
on Facebook. You've just talked about, they have their terms and conditions. They have
that's self-regulation.
Their regulations. There's self-regulation there. And then we have laws in this country.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing up those laws. Latif, let's talk about this suspension of Facebook story that seems to have upset everyone. What would it look like to suspend Facebook in Kenya?
But why suspend it?
No. Can it actually happen? Can you actually suspend Facebook in Kenya? Facebook does not have a communication authority license. So you cannot revoke their license like you do with media houses. So
you can block access.
Whatever, yes, and that would be interfering with another layer of rights. So even that suspension is such a difficult thing to achieve. So we shouldn't even, be using that as and I'm not calling for suspension. I'm calling for them to actually implement minimum standards that
Neema,
their own guidelines call the break glass measures.
Neema, I am of the view that this conversation is being tilted in one particular direction, and yet there are very many conversations that can revolve around this very same thing that we are talking about. Because before TikTok, there was another thing called Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, before all these guys came onto the scene, people were spewing hate speech. Okay? NCIC came into being because we realized the dangers that are posed by these so-called freedoms that people have that some people will abuse.
It was people were using leaflets before.
Yes, they were using leaflets.
To a greater.
Yes. And then the moment we had vernacular radio stations all over, so that even I could have one in my own bedroom, then it got even more. Now, we have a country that has allowed that proliferation of communication. So anybody can communicate. Now, we are encountering one of the pitfalls of such freedoms. It's just what I may refer to as a necessary evil. It's something that will occur. It's a baby and the bath water here. Okay? And the water, as I see it, is not as dirty as it's being painted.
So do you want stronger laws that...
Oh, no.
that make...
I'm not
I
even
want
going there.
NCIC to do its job more.
Yes.
I'll just picking up from what CT is saying. I hear what you're saying, and I hear the concern of the proliferation of hate on social media is real. Okay, is it a new avenue that could be used to then spread hate and incite violence? Of course it is. What should be done? Is it dealing with these platforms, or is it dealing with the root cause?
Yes.
I think we should go to the root cause. I'm opposed to those things of saying even Facebook itself becoming its own police and authority. I have said this on this show before. That thing of Facebook waking up one day and deciding we don't like Donald Trump. People are complaining about him, so we block Donald Trump from accessing that Facebook. I am opposed to it. If he wants to post, let him post. Have ways of regulating and dealing with him. Let people stop following him. Let people stop accessing. Use your algorithm to reduce the people who view
What
his
he
messages.
says.
Or
what he
counter
says.
whatever it is that he's
Or
presenting.
counter what he's saying.
Yes.
But that thing of saying that, because we've noticed there are people who are anti-vaxxers, so we're not going to allow anti-vax messages on our platform.
No, that is
Not only that,
interference.
where do you
no.
stop?
Yes.
Where do you stop?
No, and I agree with you. I agree with you totally. But let's go back to the issue of power. Who has power here? We are literally talking about a situation where, Facebook is more powerful than the government of Kenya.
No, it isn't.
It is.
In what realm?
No, it isn't.
It
In
is.
what realm?
In terms of Facebook can actually, or has actually influenced a lot of things in the society in Kenya. It can influence culture. It influences spending ability to even how we think. So for the reason why we still have to put a lot of emphasis for not just Facebook, but big tech and actually multinational companies is when they have that amount of power, they need to follow it and tamper it with matching responsibility. When you have the power to influence an entire generation to think a certain way, to relate, and it has been good as well. They have, if it was not for social media, we would not have an emphasis on conservation and the green movement. Like, they have popularized something that the political class was unable to talk about freely, and to get the young generation, millennials, actually very very passionate about human rights injustices and environmental injustices. That same power can be used to also for the good, and that's what we're saying. It's not like not having Facebook versus, if we have Facebook, and we also don't want Facebook to be under, politicians. Because they still play a very important role in the newly defined democratic space. Because this is what it is. This is the new democratic space. However, should they militarize the people who would never have had the kind of audience if you were using Wakenya? And if you're going to weaponize them, weaponize the peacemakers as well. Just apply the peace, the rule fairly. And let's remember, we also have limits to our constitutional rights of freedom of expression, which can be curtailed, and we surrender, as a civil liberty, we surrender our freedoms when national security is threatened, or the physical security of the person
the
next to
curtailing
you.
you speak of are what we sometimes refer to as consequences. In this country, if you want to walk along this street and pee in the full view of everybody, you do so, you'll get arrested. Okay? Freedoms are things that people must internalize, understand, and determine how it is they are going to use it. The real strength of fighting what we're talking about here is precisely that, getting people to be the ones who are in a position to make the decisions on how to handle these things. If people do not accept not to proliferate hate speech, it doesn't matter how many laws we create, they will create even more ways of transmitting those same hate speeches.
Yeah, but some are born, not hating anybody, but because of their their constant use of this platform, they become militaries. And we've seen radicalization. Today we're just talking about election. We've seen recruitment of Al-Shabaab here in Kenya happening on Facebook. Like, seriously, they can also require the community.
Neema, what you're saying is true, but when you're talking about militarizing people and getting people to be extremists, it's usually not Facebook. Facebook is just a purveyor of messages. Certain things happen that predisposition people to be in a certain way.
Yes,
it's a town hall.
100%.
You can't shut down a town hall because people are coming here to meet and they are.
No, but even by Facebook's own community standards, that's one of the things they have disallowed, the convening of those. So they're still not falling short in terms of implementing their own community standards. So Latif, the town hall chairman, also can decide what is going to be discussed. So in this case, they said we will not be supporting, the communing of violent extremist and terrorist groups, and they're failing. So me as I wind up, because I feel like we've talked about everything. If we can compel, just think about it for a minute. If we can compel Facebook to commit a fraction of its 117 billion annual revenue estimated from last year, to improving the conditions of content moderation in Kenya. I'm talking about Kenya because this is where my interests are.
Who do we need to call?
Everyone. If you can call Masindegwa, you can call Ikendi and Twiga or Mark Zuckerberg.
Just give us the phone number of the person.
If we can get them to just commit a fraction to improving things, we will not actually have. And by improving the conditions, it means even the content moderators themselves, they need to make it appealing to actually do this kind of work. They need to provide the proper mental health care, for these content moderators. If you're going to volunteer to clean up Facebook, to watch the worst of the worst, Latif, the figures you want, basically, if someone has to sit down and literally read hate the whole day, you need to support them.
It'll affect you.
Yes, of course, it is going to affect you. You need to be paid better.
Are they not?
Yes.
No, they are not, and that's why they've been sued in the employment court. So that's another area, but it's still relevant, because if then you're not even in good terms with the people who are doing the moderation yourself, how can you then commit to Kenyans that you're doing your best to make Facebook safer?
What you are talking about is what happens in every industry. This fight has to take place.
At some point, yes.
It has to, because a business person isn't interested really in all these things we're talking about. They're interested in the bottom line. Now, they have to be made aware, and they have to understand that the business may not do as well as they want if certain things are not adhered to.
Yes.
So,
and the judge we had earlier talked about unionizing. The reason that the case is in court is because they blocked Facebook content moderators from unionizing. That's illegal even by our laws.
As a basic.
Yes.
Neema,
and if Facebook can act, all these other companies will follow suit because they have that power. Thank you, Latif.
Thank you. Tumekusikia. Tatupatia namba, tutawapigia simu.
Sisi hata email address tunaweza kuwatumia.
Tutawaambia.
Hata namba yao, hata simu.
And send in a petition. Please sign our petition.
Signing of online petitions. I need to be convinced that they ever move anywhere.